Great. So welcome back to grade 7 math. We're now looking at rotations in the transformations chapter. So we looked at translations and reflections. And now the more difficult one is the rotations because it's hard to kind of see what's happening. Just as a review, when you do have something that's in a particular quadrant, when you rotate it around the origin, so we'll just put the rotation point here, the rotation center at the origin. If we have something that's in quadrant 1, for example, if we rotate that 90 degrees clockwise, it'll end up going to quadrant 4. If I rotate it to 90 degrees counterclockwise, it'll end up in quadrant 2. So let's start plotting our points and see what it looks like when we plot each of these points. And I'll change colors for each point, so it'll look a little bit confusing at first, but then I'll erase all of the colors that are in there. So let's start with this triangle. We have 3 points, P, Q, and R. Start P in red. And so that's 0.23. So 0.23 is over here, and I'll mark that with the letter P. And I'm going to rotate this 90 degrees clockwise, which means that everything in this quadrant, in quadrant 1, will be moving in this direction towards quadrant 4. And so what I'm going to do in my head, and this is a little trick I came up with, is to draw in my head this kind of mental box or this rectangle. So I have this rectangle that I'll color in, and you can either cut this out of paper or tissue paper or graph paper. So I have a 2 by 3 rectangle, so it looks like this. And the pivot point for grade 7 and grade 8 will always be the center. It'll always be 0, 0. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this and we're going to mentally spin it around that center, just like to make a little pinwheel. And 90 degrees would mean that this corner here stays exactly where it is, but everything else kind of flops down. So this line here now flops down to over here. And these 3 blocks make this kind of 3-block pattern down here. So what I did was I took this rectangle, I stuck a little pin here, or I took a little nail, hammered it in there, and then I just, with the rest of the blocks, I just rotated it around. So now I get kind of this rectangle over here. Now, so this corner was P, so that means now this corner on this side will be P prime. Now, what I'm going to do is I'll just erase this rectangle, just so that we can have some sight of what's happening underneath all of this. So now what I'm going to do is I'll just draw without really a ruler, so hopefully this works. I'll connect these points, this one and this one. And so there's a couple things that we notice after we've rotated that rectangle. This angle here is 90 degrees. I mean, it's not a perfect 90 degrees just because of the way that I'm not using a ruler. But it is a 90-degree angle. Also, the distance, so if I were to take a ruler and measure this distance from the origin to P, is the same distance as the origin to P prime. The reason why this is without even a ruler is because I could see that the rectangle is still the same. It's still a 2 by 3 rectangle. This is still a 2 by 3 rectangle. I found the diagonal, so really that distance is the same. So the 2 important things in a rotation that you have to make sure of is that there's the actual angle between the original point, the axis of, or the center of rotation, and the image point, and also the distance stays the same, that I'm still keeping the same distance. This means if I were to use a compass, that's a little pointy thing with the pencil. So if I use the compass and measured that distance and I drew kind of like this arc, P prime would still be on this arc as well, because they're all the same distance. So that's what a compass is. A compass measures the same distance all the way around. So P and P prime would be on the same kind of circle if I were to use this compass to rotate it all the way around. So those are my first 2 points. Now let me just change colors to, say, green for letter Q. So Q is 0, 4. So 0, 4 is up here. And I'm going to rotate that one 90 degrees. So 90 degrees, good thing on an axis is anything on an axis stays on an axis. So on this y-axis here, if I rotate this 90 degrees, that just flops down and becomes Q prime over here. Again, if I were to draw my imaginary lines, it makes a 90-degree angle, and the distance is still 4 blocks for each one. I'll change my colors again to blue for R, which is -1, -2, which is right here. And again, I'll draw my imaginary rectangle. I put the nail right in the center, and I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees clockwise, which means that's going to go up to here. So now I have this new rectangle, and because the diagonal distance was r, the new diagonal is r prime. So let me just erase these two rectangles so that we have all of our points that are a little bit more clear. And then let me just join up all of these points. So I'll start with my original one. I'll draw this in red. So let me connect my P, Q, and R. Makes this kind of isosceles looking triangle, but I think it's a scalene triangle. And then now, when we rotate it, I'll just change this to orange. That P, Q, and R prime look like this. So it's a really tricky transformation because we're rotating it and it's hard to kind of visualize that whole shape. So when you are rotating a shape, just rotate each individual points. And so let's find the coordinates of the image points. So P prime ends up being 3, -2. Q prime ends up being 4, 0. And R prime ends up being -2, 1. So with these three new points, I can connect those and I get this new image for the triangle. So what we'll do is I'll pause the video and try letter B and try letter C. And is there a letter D as well? We'll try letter B, C, and D, and I'll just give you the answers after you pause the video, and then afterwards you could try the homework. Great, so hopefully you understood this lesson, and I'll put this on pause to give you the answers for the rest of the questions. Great, so after you've tried it, so now let's go over the answers. So for letter B, we have the answers, P prime is -3, 2. Q prime is -4, 0. And R prime is 2, -1. And if I keep going lower, for letter C, I have P prime is -2, -3. Q prime is 0, -4. Oh, Microsoft is not working. We have 0, -4, and R prime is 1, 2. And then for letter D, we have S prime is 2, 4. T prime is 4, 1. U prime is 2, -3. And V prime is 0, -3. And if we saw here 270 degrees counterclockwise, we didn't teach you 270 degrees, but really that's the same thing as 180 plus 90, or the other way around is if you look at this and we start 270 degrees this way is the same thing as 90 degrees going that way. So 270 degrees counterclockwise is the same thing as 90 degrees clockwise. So then we have these questions here. We have these questions here that you could do for homework, and we'll do these in class, and then we'll go over some of these questions in class. So hopefully you understood this lesson.